Hello, this is Miss Dagenford, and we're going to continue our survey through the animal kingdom by looking at annelids, mollusks, and flatworms. But before we do that, let's kind of keep track of what we've been looking at. Now, this is a little doodle I made a couple of years ago to try to kind of explain what you tend to see in, pardon me, what you tend to see in the animal kingdom. So, as we go from the left, which would be simple, and over to the right, which is complex, they're going to get bigger. And as they get bigger, they're going to have trouble getting the nutrients and oxygen and getting rid of the toxins like carbon dioxide. So, one of the things that you will notice, and it's right underneath the trends over body planes here, you will notice that as an animal gets bigger, it has more cells. Now, becoming multicellular is a good way to be more efficient because each cell is very small and you have a lot of surface area for the volume you have. Now, the way you can think about that is when I drew this, I used a lot of ink to draw my cells, and the ink represents the surface area. So there's a lot of surface area in our multicellular organisms. However, that also means that each one of those cells needs oxygen, needs nutrients, and needs to get rid of carbon dioxide and nitrogen waste like ammonia. And so you'll notice when the organism is very simple, like a sponge, which had lots of holes, lots of pores, and it was constantly circulating water throughout its body, it did not need a circulatory system. There was no blood, there were no blood vessels, there's no heart. All of the oxygen and nutrients it needed were simply coming in through the water, distributing through the cells. Now, in flatworms get a little bit more complicated, but because they are flat, it's pretty easy for oxygen to diffuse in and carbon dioxide to diffuse out. So you still don't need a circulatory system. There's only two layers. Same thing with cnidarians, only two layers. And so we aren't going to see a circulation system until we start getting into mollusks and arthropods. And at that point, it's going to be an open circulation plan where the heart pumps blood, but the blood then bathes the organs and then gets pulled back into the vessels at the bottom. And then eventually, we're going to get to see a closed circulation system in mammals, birds, all vertebrates, and then we'll see it in cephalopods, and then weirdly today in earthworms. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's start with flatworms. Flatworms are simple bilateral animals. So this is we're going to start seeing that right and left bilateral symmetry here. And we're going to look at briefly three different kinds. There's planarians, flukes, and tapeworms, which if you have the last two, you're not a happy camper. So flatworms are going to be the simplest bilateral animal. They have a solid body. And what they mean by that is there's no cavity inside, right? If you were to go into surgery, there's an abdominal cavity that contains organs, or there's a thoracic cavity that contains your heart and lungs. But these don't. If you were to cut through a planaria, it's just all cells. And only the gut is there that has a little bit of a cavity. And the gut is incomplete. So it's similar to the jellyfish. It has one hole. The food goes in, it gets digested, and then whatever is left just gets put back out. So the new things that you want to notice with planarians is they have a head. Now that does not seem like that big of a deal, but if you have a head, you also now have a central nervous system, a brain. Now it's not much of a brain. It's not a brain to write home about. But when you have a brain, when you have a central nervous system, you also suddenly have more organized nerves. And then when you have those centralized nervous systems, suddenly you get complex neural pathways, reflexes, and the ability to respond and start making thought processes as a planarian can do, right? But we would still consider these more complex behaviors, certainly more than the cnidarians. And so these are kind of considered the first hunters. If you have a brain, if you can go out and search for things and process information, then you are going to go on the hunt. Now that doesn't mean they're always carnivorous, but that what we just simply mean is you're going to go searching. So bigger body means now it's a more complicated distributions, and so now you have a digestive system with branches to distribute nutrients. And you see that up here on the right, the branched gastrovascular cavity. That's going to allow the planarian to get all of the nutrients where it needs to go. You also start to see a very simple excretory system for those nitrogenous wastes. You can think of these as very simple kidneys. Now, I already went over this. There's still real no need for circulatory or respiratory systems. They are flat, which means that they have ample ability to get oxygen and carbon dioxide diffused in and out. And these guys are hermaphroditic. They have both reproductive organs for both male and female. And so you can see that here we start seeing the ovary and oviduct. Oviduct is simply going to be a very simple tube to release the eggs, or carry the eggs, transport the eggs. And then same thing with sperm duct. Sperm ducts are just very basic tubes to carry sperm cells. And then in hermaphroditic organisms, each mating planaria would donate sperm to the other, and in that way both now are fertilized. It's very efficient reproductive strategy. And so here's what they look like. They have this pharynx that can kind of come out of their body. They actually have two little eye spots. Now they kind of look cute and adorable. They're not really crossing their eyes. That's just kind of how their eye spots look. But they do still look kind of adorable with their crossed eyes. And then you can see here's the solid body. There's no cavities. There is that digestive gastrovascular cavity, but there's no internal cavities that hold organs. And you'll watch a couple of videos that help you out here. So again, just let's keep track of everything. In our nervous system, we had none with our sponges. No response, other than just individual cells responding, but no complicated signals. Nerve nets are found in the cnidarians, and you have a very simple stimulus response. I touch something, I'm going to either pull away, or if it's food, I'm going to attack. So, our motto for our cnidarians would be, I can react. And then the next step up in the nervous system would be cephalization. And remember, cephalization is the head. And so in bilateral organisms, you start seeing this where the head now is processing information. So I can process, let's go hunt for food, let's go find it. And so from now on, we're going to see that in bilateral animals, a brain, and you're going to start seeing more and more senses as well. So the next phylum we're going to survey would be annelids, and the friendly earthworm would be the annelid that you are familiar with. Now, annelids start having a coelom, and a coelom is an internal cavity. And so we start seeing that in the more complicated animals, where the the body cavity on the inside, yes, you have the digestive tract, but then you have a cavity right next to it. And that would be akin to our abdominal cavity or our thoracic cavity, where in other animals, you're going to start seeing organs in these cavities. Annelids are called that because they have segmented bodies. Think annual, right? Annual, it repeats. So, annelid, repeating segmented bodies. And so each segment sometimes will have, in some cases, like the kidneys or the nerves, each segment will kind of have similar little organs parts in it. So the earthworm, you can see, I'll show you a better picture of it. So earthworm, what's new in earthworms? Well, in an earthworm, you start seeing again that body cavity. In an earthworm, we have a circulatory system, and this circulatory system is closed. And that means we have a closed circulatory system. That means that you have the heart, and the heart is pumping blood. The blood is inside the vessels and it never leaves the vessels. So the blood cells are always contained within the blood vessel. In an open circulatory system, the heart is pumping blood, but then the blood vessels kind of open out like a garden hose. The blood spills over whatever organs are there, providing oxygen, and then the heart, because it's pumping, it's pulling blood back in. And so you're going to start seeing some organisms with an open, but you're going to start seeing a lot of them with a closed. We also start seeing respiratory structures because, again, as you get bigger, you have to try to distribute oxygen and nutrients to your body cells. And so from now on, we're going to start seeing something. We're going to see gills, or in the case of earthworm, we're going to see that long body. The skin is going to be how they get their oxygen diffusing. The earthworm is terrestrial, but a lot of the other ones are aquatic. We have marine annelids and leeches, which are they will leech on and get the blood from its host. Not very lovely there. And so here is your typical earthworm, and not very super impressive. But there they are. They've got a brain, very tiny. These will, like if you were to open them up in a dissection, you would literally see these guys look like the head of a pin, if not smaller. And then their nerve cord goes along their belly. They have, we call them hearts, but they're really just enlarged arteries. Sometimes books will call them aortic arches, like the aorta we have. And then the blood will go down the tube. And then you see that complete digestive system, mouth, pharynx, the crop and gizzard, which is akin to a storage tank, and then a gizzard helps grind things up. And then the rest of the body is a big intestine, which then goes to the end. And then here you have each segment divided by a septum, a wall. And each one will also have a little nephridia, which is a very simple kidney. So again, we're starting to get some more complex body systems. All of these will be because the animal is getting bigger, and they have to then distribute and transport materials in some way. So most annelids are hermaphroditic. Again, we're talking about both reproductive organs, and that will end our annelids.